Alrighty, guys, that was Nikki and the Corvettes with Gimme Gimme. Thank you for joining us. This is Pop Culture Feminists. I'm one of your hosts, Scout.
And I'm your other host, Lily.
And today, in honor of October, we are doing a spooky episode. We will be talking about women in horror films.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exactly. Specifically, something that ties many women in horror films together, the final girl trope.
Yes.
Lily, you want to lead off with that one?
Yeah, we're going to come out of the bat swinging and not out of the bat. Out of somewhere. Dugout, I guess. That's where they do baseball. But we're going to
We've done sports episodes.
We've done sports. We know. We're going to come out swinging.
We did a whole tennis episode.
We're going to cover our main idea, right?
Cover our bases?
No.
Is that the sports metaphor, Lily?
Sure. I was kind of done with that, but sure. Okay. The final girl trope may be something that you've heard of at home if you're, have any awareness of pop culture. I feel like it's a fairly predominant idea.
Well, people may not know it by the name.
True. We just know it because I feel
film.
like either we've both taken a lot of film and women and gender studies classes.
All right, so lay it out for us, Lily. What is the final girl trope?
The final girl trope is a trope that refers to kind of the common thread, the common theme of the last female survivor in a horror film. So that would, if, for example, like a serial killer is after a group of teens, you commonly see like one girl left alive. And not only that, but usually, or at least in...
She's always hot.
Yeah. And at least in
usually blonde.
Yeah, more classic horror films or kind of the slasher genre of the 1980s. It was one who was more like morally pure than the other girls.
Yes, she's the virgin.
Exactly. So this is actually a term that was coined by a woman named Carol J. Clover in her book Men, Women, and Chainsaws.
I love that book, by the way.
It's
an excellent book.
I've been meaning to read it. I really want to. So that was in 1992. And, she was mostly referring to the slasher genre of the 1980s where this trope originated.
Oh, and 70s, too.
Yeah. And it has since, kind of expanded to cover a lot of other ideas of women. So it's not kind of honed in on that one specific, the virginal hot girl,
right?
Who's the last survivor. But it's a prevalent idea.
All right, so we're gonna talk first with y'all about some classic horror films before we move into some more modern and spins off of the horror film. But I think we should start by talking about Halloween.
Dun,
Michael
dun, dun.
Myers.
Yep. One of the original slasher.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, one of the original slasher.
And I think that's
films.
relevant. Actually, Jamie Lee Curtis, Woman of the Week. She's coming out with the new Halloween movie just in time for this Halloween.
Yes.
As kind of a revamp of, this, is it 74? No, 78. 78. Horror film, so she's reprising her old character, so I thought we'd make her Woman of the Week for stepping back into the horror genre to represent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially as a woman who is not in her 30s.
I know.
Which,
isn't that, she's the lead character in a horror movie.
And she's not young. Amazing. Can you believe it?
Seriously, we've talked about this before, but in case you have missed that part of our episodes, Hollywood has a clear predilection to choose younger women as their leading roles, particularly in certain roles, and horror films would fall into that category.
Mm-hmm. And especially in a what word am I looking for? In pairing with an older man and a younger woman.
Yep.
Not necessarily applicable in this case, but in general. So Halloween. Many of you may have seen it. I assume
probably
a lot of our audience has seen it. A lot of people in general have seen it just because it's a classic and considered, kind of representative of the genre, and specifically the slasher genre.
Right. And obviously for those of you who haven't seen it, Jamie Lee Curtis is the one who fills our final girl type trope.
Yes. Halloween is about a serial killer named Michael Myers, who, as a child, he kills his sister on Halloween. He's taken to a mental institution, but he breaks out
15 years later on
Halloween and continues his reign of terror around a neighborhood.
Absolutely.
He manages to kill, I think, 3 or 4 more people. Maybe 4. He does kill a guard or something at the beginning.
Because he kills a couple, and then he kills another girl.
Yeah. And then he tries to kill Jamie Lee Curtis.
So many times. That's part of the final girl trope, too. She has to escape multiple times.
Yes.
And then be dragged back into it.
Yes. And usually either defeat the hero, she's the hero. Defeat the villain herself, or someone else defeats the villain. In this case, he is shot by a police officer or a detective, but he does disappear. So he's not technically defeated.
Yeah. Not to do any spoilers, we're going to get there, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre, kind of the same unsatisfying ending, open for a sequel.
Not exactly in the same sense, but yes, generally.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
The tone of the ending is a little bit different. But, so this role of Jamie Lee Curtis, I don't remember what her character's name is. Lori? Yes, it is Lori. She, very much a stereotypical, final girl. She is, she's very attractive, but, has no boyfriend. She's a virgin. She's kind of contrasted with the more, promiscuous of her friends, who are very much presented as being, kind of
sexually
wild,
active.
Yeah, wild, sexually active teens and
partiers,
and Michael Myers actively kills them while they're kind of engaged in such activities. One girl in particular.
The other part of the final girl trope. I mean, like, the juxtaposition that she creates to the other victims. There's an implication that she survives because she's a virgin. Yeah,
exactly.
Because she's pure.
Mm-hmm.
The other people get killed because they're
promiscuous.
They're promiscuous. They're partiers. They're sinful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of almost in a sense like a morality play sort of theme where the whole slasher genre was kind of a backlash against the sexual revolution and a greater degree of promiscuity in young women especially. So, a lot of the films are going to center on that and frames the villain as kind of a moral judge of the female characters and the male characters, but to a lesser degree.
Absolutely.
The male characters, especially in this film, are killed more because they're in the way rather than any sort of, impassioned rage.
Yeah, I know that's not always the case, but it's very
in this
often
film
the case.
Especially, yeah. But yeah, and it goes back even to his sister, who we see him kill as a child in the beginning of the film because she has a boy over and sleeps with him, and then he leaves, and then that's when Michael comes in and kills his sister while she's...
I had forgotten about that.
While she's not clothed, I believe.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So, it sets you up right away for what you're gonna see for the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm.
But no, our final girl, Lori, does survive. She does technically defeat the villain, at least for a time, as he is shot and then disappears so they could make a sequel.
Or 80.
Or 80.
Yeah.
Including one that comes out this year.
Halloween 2018. All right.
Honestly, I want to see it, though.
I kind of do, too, just for the sake of Jamie Lee Curtis, honestly.
Exactly.
All right. So let's talk about how the final girl trope plays into Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
I've forgotten her name already. Sarah? I think it's Sarah.
Yes, I believe it is Sarah.
Sally.
Sally Hardesty. Okay, this, Okay, Halloween is a little bit spooky, it's kind of fun though in a way.
Not quite.
You don't have to take it as seriously.
This is on the gorrific.
Gore, yeah, kind of horror, kind of makes you sick to watch level of horror
absolutely.
film.
I mean, the villain's name is Leatherface, for goodness sake.
Yeah, it's very gross. But basically the basic premise of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a group of 5 teens is taking a road trip in Texas. Not sure exactly where they're going, but they end up going to this old house that Sally's family owns,
Yes,
I think.
Yes,
and
it was their property.
yeah, eventually they're all lured separately into a different house where this crazy family of murderers lives. Not only murderers, cannibals.
Oh, yep.
Not just Leatherface, but
His brother and his grandfather and
yes,
one more guy.
Yeah, there's at least 4 dudes. One is very, very old. But
yeah, that's the grandfather.
yeah, just crazy.
That's
love killing.
When he sucks on her finger, that's just
It's very
blech.
gross. Yeah. But essentially, they kill off the rest of her friends, including her paraplegic brother.
yeah. He just like cuts him in half with a chainsaw.
Yes. Though to be fair, he's the second to last to be killed, I think.
Still.
So a surprising length of time for him to survive in a horror film,
Well,
I think.
but we'll note that the first people to die were a couple who
Yes.
snuck off to have sex.
Yes, exactly.
So much a continuation of the moral judgment of promiscuity, blah blah blah.
Precisely. Exactly. Though I think Sally does have a boyfriend. Am I off base? Is Jerry her boyfriend?
I don't remember.
Okay. Cool.
I don't think so.
They may just be friends.
I
but,
think they're friends, maybe.
Oh no, yeah. I think so. Regardless, we have Sally, our final girl, and
She definitely does not have any sort of sexual urges in the movie.
no, not that are seen there.
She remains very pure and moral and
Yeah.
bleh.
She's not quite the bookworm that I think
Jamie Lee
Laurie,
Curtis plays. Yeah,
Laurie
yeah.
plays, but definitely, kind of has this compassionate side for her brother, kind of a protective urge, and then. So once all her friends and her brother are killed off, she is taken into the house. She's kind of tied up while they have their cannibalistic feast.
Right. And then they
scare the crap out of her.
Well, I know. I
on
was saying. Then
purpose.
she escapes.
Yeah.
But then, she gets picked up again. Oh, that's who the other guy is. The other guy's the gas station owner.
Yeah.
Because she runs and he's like, I'll help you. And then he ties her up and takes her back.
to the house, where they proceed to scare the crap out of her. They try to get the old man to kill her because apparently he was the one they learned it all from.
Yeah, but he's basically a
He's
skeleton. And
so old. Like they show
can't
him
do anything.
Yeah, they show him in the film, and you think he's already dead, but he is not. Miraculously, he is still barely alive. But obviously, he fails to kill her because he's so old.
120.
So she manages to escape again. She runs and runs and runs. She runs out into the road. I believe the youngest of the bunch gets hit by like a truck or something
Yeah.
while they're in the road. And she tries to get the truck driver to help her. I think he is also murdered by Leatherface.
Something happens
But
to
she
him.
does manage to jump on the back of a truck.
A different truck.
Yeah, and she starts laughing hysterically. And then Leatherface just kind of spins around in the middle of the road for a while.
Waving his he waves his
waving his
chainsaw,
knife,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It is quite unsettling.
Oh, extremely. That's what I meant in the sense that like he's not defeated in the same way that
No.
Michael Myers is not definitively defeated.
No, but it is, I don't know. There's a very, very, very difference in tone between Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just in terms of I don't know. Texas Chainsaw Massacre just kind of messes with your head a little bit, and I think it's so that we can more closely identify with our final girl, because clearly everything is very disorienting, and even just not in an acting standpoint, even in a real standpoint from when they were shooting, it was so hot. And they would shoot for such a long time and not have very much water that the actors
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the actors themselves were overheated and stressed out and disoriented, and I think that definitely comes through in the performance, especially for Sally, and it definitely scares and disorients the audience as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think another thing about this film is that we're not necessarily encouraged to identify with the main character, which I think is a common thing in horror movies. You're not always supposed to want to identify with them that closely just because so many bad things are happening to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, they don't want you to be living through their, walking in their shoes.
Yeah, so they'll purposefully make these characters sort of annoying, sort of unsympathetic, so that when bad things start happening, part of you is like, oh, well, they got what was coming to them. But then you
you're like, eh.
Yeah, you have to step back and be like, wait, do they deserve that just because they were annoying teens who were sexually promiscuous?
No.
Not really. But it kind of puts you in that headspace. And I think in the end you are supposed to root for the final girl. You can see the rest of the characters as disposable, but the final girl is kind of the one that you're supposed to root for.
Right, absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about everyone's favorite final girl, or at least ours.
Definitely.
Sigourney Weaver.
Yes.
Alien.
Ellen Ripley, to be more specific.
Well, yes. And Aliens. But let's just talk about Alien.
Not to the same extent, but in a general sense, yes.
Absolutely, because in Aliens, she also has Newt, and
yes,
all that happens.
Some other people live. Not in Alien.
Nope. Alien is just, her and the cat, but...
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, go ahead. Go on.
Alien, probably another one that most of you have seen, but we'll go through it anyway.
And if you haven't, you should see it, because it's amazing.
1979, Ridley Scott director. It follows a spaceship crew as they go down to the surface of a planet where there are these strange eggs. One of them opens and attacks a crew member. And when they bring him back on board, it turns out
he is impregnated.
He is impregnated with an alien thing in his chest that explodes out and then grows to a full, big, scary, horrible alien.
Absolutely terrifying.
Literally, so overpowered. It's so strong and fast, and they can hide. And
their blood is made of acid.
Their blood is acid, which is one of the scariest things about that. Always terrified me that their blood was made of acid.
You can't defend yourself against them.
No, because if you cut them,
die.
Yeah, the acid will get on you and you'll burn, and it looks like it hurts, because that happens a bunch of times in the movie where they shoot them and their head explodes, but then the acid gets on them, and it's very bad.
Completely destroys them.
Yeah. But so Ripley's running around on the ship with her crewmates, and eventually all of those crewmates are picked off
one by one,
except for her, and she manages to explode the main ship and get in an escape pod. But it turns out the alien is in the escape pod with her.
I do want to bring up the cat for one reason, and it's that it sets her up as maybe not so much as sexually pure, but is very maternal. Yes. Because she risks her life to go back and save the cat.
Yes.
So it makes her that, relatable, moral, you want her to live because she's a good person. Final girl trope.
Half of you is oh, that's sweet, but the other half of you is you big idiot.
Yeah,
why would you
absolutely
just kill the cat? Just let it go. But she does save it.
It's not even your cat.
It's not even her cat, but it is now, I guess. But so she does manage to get herself and the cat onto the escape pod, but the alien is also there, and she has to...
Big bummer.
She has to maneuver it so that she can jettison the alien into space out the airlock, which she does manage to achieve.
Yes.
And she gets in her sleepy pod and she goes to sleep.
Yeah.
For 50 years, but we'll not go into that part.
Yeah. And I mean, once again, part of the final girl trope, we saw it in Halloween, where Michael Myers chased Jamie Lee Curtis around and around and around, and he keeps catching her, and she gets away, and he catches her, and she gets away. And we saw it in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yep. Caught and get away, caught and get away.
Yep. over and over, and then we see it in Alien because you think that she's defeated the alien, she's gotten onto the escape pod, she's safe. Well, no, just kidding.
Dun.
One more battle. Final battle.
Mm-hmm. I think what I would say the difference is between Alien and the other two films. Well, first of all,
she's not a teenager.
Yes, and it's also sci-fi horror rather than just straight horror.
That's true.
But you have in Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre explicitly male villains, male killers, often female victims, whereas in Alien there's less of that. You can't really assign any gender to the alien because,
right?
I mean, in a sense, it's generally
in
masculine.
Aliens.
Yeah,
they absolutely
in aliens, but
assign a gender.
But in Alien, it's kind of generally neutral. Occasionally, peters or tiptoes into masculinity, and the victims are mostly male because the spaceship crew is mostly male. There is one other woman on the crew of the Nostromo, which is something that I always like to bring up because she is shown to be kind of I don't want to say cowardly, but freaked out, almost hysterical.
Oh, absolutely.
Less effectual woman than Ripley, and so she is the one who is killed and not Ripley.
Right, but I mean Ripley, unlike in Aliens.
Yes.
That's such an interesting dynamic switch between Alien and Aliens, but I guess we're not going to go into that right now. But, Ripley is still presented as very feminine, just not ineffective like the redhead,
capable.
Whatever her name is.
Lambert. I know her name.
That's right. Well, they get, oh my gosh. Have you seen the uncut version of Alien, or have you just seen the theatrical cut?
I think I've only seen the theatrical cut of the first one.
Okay, so in the uncut version, they have this fight between the two of them.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. Where
Oof.
Lambert actually I don't remember who calls who the
word.
Yes.
The B word.
Yes, absolutely. But they get into this physical altercation.
Ooh. I'm glad that's not in the theatrical version.
Yeah,
because
anyway.
I don't think that's necessary.
Exactly.
But I can't say I'm surprised.
It's very tropey, right? It's the cat fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah. I don't know. One thing I always like to bring up when talking about Alien, kind of, I did say there's kind of a gender-neutral vibe to the Alien, but there is one scene in particular where I feel like it kind of crosses that line into masculine violence against a woman, and that's when Lambert is killed.
Oh, yeah, because the stinger is very phallic in that moment.
Yes,
yeah.
And the way, I feel like it's a very straightforward killing of the rest of the crew, but Lambert is kind of the only one we see the alien kind of toy with, kind of play with, in a way that's very, it has this sexual undertone, this undertone of assault, because he's staring at her. Now I'm saying he for the alien because of the tone of this scene. The tail kind of comes around the back of her leg.
Subliminal messaging does, y'all.
Exactly. The tail comes around the back of her leg, and she's just kind of frozen in place, terrified, and it kind of goes up her body, and then that's when we cut away, and that's when she's presumably killed. And it might not stand out to you at first, but it's something that's always stood out to me in the movie before I even could put words on what was up with that scene. But
absolutely, that scene always was different.
Yes, there's a definite different tone to that scene. But yeah, so even the contrast between that and Ripley as females, I don't think Ripley is really treated in the same way, which it could be an underlying tone of that virginal idea, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, like I said, I think she's presented more as like a maternal than a virginal figure.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the second one, but
Well, yeah, obviously. But then she has some different masculine overtones, and that's just a whole nother ball game.
It is.
Alrighty, y'all. We are gonna play you some Beyonce, some Nicki and the Corvettes, and when we come back, we'll be talking about parody horror, and if you stay tuned even later, we'll be talking about some modern horror. All right. Thank you. Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back to Pop Culture Feminists. Today we are talking about horror films in honor of October. By the way, Pop Culture Feminists brought to you by the station Studio U, Voice of OU.
Woo.
And you can follow the Pop Culture Feminists on Facebook or Twitter. Just search us up. We'll show up.
Or you can listen on the TuneIn app.
Yes, you can listen on the TuneIn app. You can listen on kxou.ou.edu. You can also find us on
Live.
Facebook Live, which I already mentioned, and YouTube.
Yeah. The following Monday.
Woo.
Woo.
You can catch us all sorts of places.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
all the places.
We've been talking about horror films today. We covered Halloween and Alien and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all in relation to the final girl trope.
Mm-hmm.
We already kind of covered our classic horror films that we wanted to talk about.
Yes.
But I kind of want to move into parody horror, especially since we're talking about the final girl trope. Just because, in my opinion, Scary Movie, the opening scene of Scary Movie 1 is literally the perfect explanation of the final girl trope. This girl, you know, she's really beautiful. She's a teenager. She's, I guess she's not wearing white at first, but later we see her in her underwear and she's wearing white underwear. So very virginal there. But, you know, she is being called by this killer because they're making fun of, you know, the I'm in your house thing and whatever. But when they're making fun of the final girl trope, it's because, you know, she runs and she has the option. There's a table full of weapons. There's like a gun and a knife and a baseball bat and then a banana. And she grabs the banana and runs.
Course. Yeah.
And then she runs out into her backyard and there's literal signage that points one direction and says safety and points the other direction and says death. And she runs the direction that says death. And then she's running through her yard, but the sprinklers come on and suddenly everything goes slow motion. Oh, well, actually, first the killer partially catches her and just tears off her clothes. And so she's running through the sprinklers in her white underwear, matching underwear, mind you. And everything goes slow motion, and she's like flipping her blonde hair, and she's wiping the water off her face.
As you would if you were running from a killer.
Yes, obviously. But yeah, there's just all sorts of little digs at the final girl trope in that opening scene, which I thought was perfectly done. And then Scary Movie goes on to kind of subvert some of those. Well, actually, I guess not, because the last girl who gets killed is the virgin. Well, for most of the movie anyway. She at one point has like electric fence underwear on.
What?
Because, you know, she's pure and you can't have her.
Right.
But and actually one of the people trying to kill her is her boyfriend because she won't have sex with him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Even though he's not like the killer. But he ends up being a killer. Yeah. Anyway, and you know, she's all pure and she's kind of innocent, even though it's funny because her dad sells like drugs and it's a whole thing. That movie is making fun of a lot of stuff, and the final girl trope is only just a little bit of it.
Right.
But she also gets, you know, kind of cornered a few times, but she continuously gets away, probably because she's pure. And then, even in the end, it's kind of like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the villain doesn't get caught or defeated.
Right.
Because why would he? It's a horror movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was really my whole section on parody horror, although there's a lot of it out there, you know. A Scary Movie, there's like 5 Scary Movies.
Right.
And then there's Scream, I believe.
Is
No,
that
Scream is
parody
no,
horror?
it's not.
I
guess
thought
it's
it
not.
was straight up.
There's another there's another section of parody horror movies besides Scary Movie.
Right.
Well, anyway. But yeah, that's a whole thing on its own. But now that we talked about how the trope plays into, classic film, let's talk about it in relation to like more modern horror, because I think you guys will see with us that sometimes it still is kind of there but slightly changed, and other times it gets flipped on its head in its entirety. Lily, do you want to talk about Cabin in the Woods to kick us off?
I did want to talk about Cabin in the Woods.
It's 2012.
2012. Drew Goddard directing. Joss Whedon producing.
Woo!
So,
Feminist.
yeah.
He was the first man ever to graduate with a degree in women and gender studies from Oxford.
Interesting.
Go Joss Whedon. Sorry, continue.
Yeah.
Oh, we should talk about Buffy. Sorry, go on.
Not quite straight up parody of horror, more of it is comedic horror, and literally it's described as an attempt to revitalize the slasher film genre and as a critical satire on kind of the final girl trope and kind of tropes in horror films of like the audience getting gratification out of watching the characters suffer. So yeah, a very interesting film, because it starts out, you think it's going to be one thing. It's just a bunch of college kids going into the woods to stay in a cabin, and you're like, oh, I've seen this before. I know where this is going.
Right.
But in actuality, it turns out that the cabin is kind of like an experiment that these people are monitoring to kind of it's like to appease like some ancient gods, but it's kind of yeah, they run like these experiments all over the world about like these kind of stereotypical horror situations. Like when you go into their facility, you see on screens these things happening, like a ghost in a school in Japan and all this stuff. And the reason they're doing it is trying to get like sacrifices to appease some ancient gods.
Holy moly.
So they don't wake up and destroy the world. But ultimately, most of the teenagers die off, but there's 2 left, including kind of our virginal final girl.
Right.
And this one guy who we see get killed, we think he's dead, but it turns out he didn't die, so that's already kind of like, oh, wait, she's not the final girl. And, like, the whole idea is, like, she has to be the last one to be killed because she's the virgin. But they end up finding out about how it's all, like, an experiment and a simulation, and they kind of break into the facility, and they let all these horror monsters loose in the facility to kill a bunch of the people in there. And then they get there, and the head of the organization's like, we have to sacrifice you guys, because if not, the world is gonna end. And they're like, well, but so you think they're gonna be like, well, they're gonna lay down their lives for the good of humanity.
Right.
And they do not. They kill the head of the organization, and they just sit there, and they're like, well, world's gonna end. And they're like, well, maybe it's good to have someone else take over for a while. Like a very nihilistic
I love it.
ending. So yeah, the movie ends with the old gods rising and like starting the apocalypse. And so definitely takes it in a different direction that you were expecting, and definitely turns the final girl on its head, because I think in the movie she actually says, I'm not a virgin, like, and then they're like, well, we make do with what we can get.
That's so funny.
It's hysterical. It's actually a really good movie.
Oh my goodness, I'll have to watch that. Unfortunately, I haven't seen that one, so I'll definitely have to check that one out.
And it's weird because usually something I don't really like in films is, oh, the world is gonna end, because it fills me with kind of a existential sort of dread. But in this film, it's just played so I don't know, kind of comedically and kind of like, oh, well, we don't really care.
Right, that's great. I love the nihilist ending.
It just works so well, and it's very funny, and I think it's very well done as a satire, which, you know, not all satire is all that well done or all that insightful, but I think it really works in this case to kind of criticize kind of the, you know, sometimes horror movies can get a little hollow, a little shallow.
Right.
Where they're not really saying anything important. So this film was like, well, we're going to talk about other horror movies and say something important about them, and I can respect that. I can get behind that.
Sweet. Right. Okay. Well, next movie, not nearly as deep, not nearly as quality.
Yeah.
Let me just preface this. Obviously a movie I have seen, and it was kind of a train wreck. But the reason I want to talk about it is because I love the ending, because it totally throws you for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think something's going to happen. Oh, something else happens. And you're like, ooh, twist. And then you're like, oh, okay, I've recovered from the twist. And then they're like, just kidding, one more twist.
Here's another one.
So, I thought I'd talk about this one. Y'all are going to laugh when you hear the title, especially if you've seen this movie. You're like, why is she wanting to talk about that movie?
Yeah.
We're talking about Zombievers. Have you seen it, Lily?
I have not seen it. I have heard of it. I've seen the poster, which is a treat to look at.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The whole time I was watching it, really couldn't tell if it was meant to be a parody.
Right.
I'd like to think that it is, and that it's not just a...
That they have some self-awareness.
Right. Surely they couldn't not, you know?
Surely.
That's what I like to tell myself when I'm talking about Zombievers, when I'm thinking about Zombievers.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which I do often.
Yes, incredibly so. So the premise, for those of y'all who haven't been graced with the presence of Zombievers, is kind of a similar setup to what Lily was just talking about with Cabin in the Woods, you know. Oh, teenagers going out to a cabin.
Yep.
And, you know, there's 3 girls and 3 guys, and they're like couples. I think actually the girls just go out first and then the guys show up later, but that's beside the point. Yeah. We get introduced to our very virginal character, whose name is literally Mary.
Okay.
Yeah, right? When the guys show up, because she's like, go home, this is supposed to be a girls' weekend. And, you know, the other girls are like, oh, come on, please let them stay. And, you know, she protests, but eventually is talked into letting them stay, but she's not happy about it, blah, 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 you know. So, you know, we're pretty set up with, okay, Mary is our final girl, right? And then, you know, as these Zombievers start showing up and eating people and doing all sorts of things, honestly, the middle of the movie isn't worth talking about. Well, it's not.
I believe you.
Zombievers show up. Things happen. People die. And then we're left with Mary and Zoe, one of the other girls. And Mary and Zoe are, you know, they've gotten away from the beavers. Yeah, I know. I feel silly saying it too. But they've gotten away from the beavers. They finally reached the road, you know, and they're going to try and find help on the road. But Zoe is all bloody. Yeah. And this is much like regular zombies, where if you get bitten, you get zombified. They learned this when their other friends got zombified and they had to kill them.
Fun.
Yes, very traumatizing.
Just a fun Saturday.
Woo. Anyway, so Zoe is all bloody, and Mary, our final girl, our virginal one, starts saying, you know, were you bitten? Were you bitten? You know, because she's scared. And Zoe's like, I wasn't bitten, but Mary has a gun because of, you know, zombies.
Yeah. Zombievers.
Yes, obviously. Anyway, and so she starts pointing the gun at Zoe. She's like, I can't trust you. How do I know you're not bitten? You're covered in blood. How could you not be bitten? And Zoe's like, I'm not. And as she's protesting, Mary actually turns into a zombie.
Oh, great.
The girl with the gun.
Mm-hmm.
The one who was set up to be our final girl figure. The one who was set up to be the savior. Because the movie kind of focuses on her, and Zoe just kind of really joins her up with her at the end there.
Right.
You know? Because we follow Mary for most of the movie. And so then the audience is like, what? Because, you know. So Zoe has to kill Mary because the zombies in this movie are a little less mindless than your traditional zombie, and she still can use the gun. So she has to get the gun away from her without being bitten, and then kill her friend Mary, who we all thought was going to be the last survivor. And now poor Zoe's all left alone, and the audience is like, phew, well, our twist is over now, right? Wrong. She flags a car down on the road, or at least she attempts to flag a car down on the road, and it's rather humorous because this car is the people who dropped the toxic sludge that zombified the beavers in the first place. And she's trying to flag it down, and she's trying to get help, and right as you think that she's going to be saved, they run her over.
Oh, God. I hate when that happens.
And that's the end of the movie.
Ugh.
I mean, there's a post-credit scene with a zombified honeybee and whatever, but
Awesome.
yeah, I know, we're all gonna die. It's the bees. Anyway,
The bees.
so I just thought, I really liked the ending of Zombiever, even though the movie was just trash. Because it plays off the final girl trope, you know? It sets us up to believe it's gonna be Mary, and then says, gotcha. Okay, so probably done talking about parody horror. Actually, how about we take a little music break before we come back with our serious modern horror?
Yeah.
All right, I do want to leave y'all with our trivia question of the week. I am throwing you an easy one this week, or at least I think easier than some of the other ones I've given you for sure, especially last week's was a doozy. But the question is, what is the first ever horror movie on record? Listen to some Florence and the Machine and tell us on Facebook or call in if you know. Alrighty, guys. Thank you for joining us. We are still talking about horror films, feminism in horror films, and right now we're going to be talking about some modern horror, since we've been talking about classic, and then we talked a little bit about parody, or comedy horror. So I was actually going to kick it off with the Babadook, which is 2015, I believe. And that is directed by a woman, Jennifer Kent. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it is about a single woman with a special needs child. And it's really unique because the villain in the film, well, at first it's kind of presented as a storybook character from this creepy children's book that just kind of shows up. Which is, this movie scared the jeepers out of me. Yeah, I know, I didn't know what to say there, but yeah, it was freaky. But as the movie goes on, we kind of realize, you know, it's presented as this character kind of possesses the woman, the mother, and kind of turns her against her son. But really you kind of realize by the end that it's something that was like a part of her. If you go full into theory, you'd kind of realize that it's her PTSD because the day her son was born, her husband was killed. And so she has a lot of trauma going on there. But so when you get to the kind of the end of the film, she realizes that she can control this monster, if you will. But the whole time in this film, she's both our hero and our villain because she keeps getting possessed by
The Babadook.
Yes, the Babadook, which is this really creepy monster who makes her really sort of violent towards her son.
Mm-hmm.
So, it makes you kind of miss that final girl trope because, like, you expect there to be someone left,
Mm-hmm.
and it's her, but, she's also the villain that you're cheering against.
Right.
But she overcomes her own demons in the end.
Yay.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I love this movie, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is an Iranian-American co-produced film.
Yes.
Beautiful film, both in cinematography and just story and everything.
Mm-hmm.
You want to kick us off with that, Lily?
I do want to kick us off with that. 2014 film, as you said, Iranian-American film. It's described as actually the first Iranian vampire western. So, that's quite a title, quite a genre definition. And it was directed by Anna Lily Amirpour, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yes.
And essentially, if I had to boil it down to a phrase, it's about a female vampire who rides around a place called the Bad City on a longboard, killing people. But in reality, it's a little bit more complicated and deep than that. But I think that a description would definitely bring in people, because it definitely brought me in, because that was my understanding of what the film was about before I watched it.
I watched it for a class and just absolutely adored it. Yeah, everything about it made me love it.
Yep, it's all in black and white, which is a choice. And to get a little bit more complicated, basically, I wouldn't say the main character is a guy, but one of the main characters is kind of a young guy. His father's a drug addict. There's this really predatory drug dealer who keeps coming, taking their money, takes the guy's car. But unluckily for the drug dealer, he runs into a girl walking home alone at night who is definitely not what she seems, and when they go to his apartment, she kills him.
Yeah.
She bites his finger off and
that's an awesome
drinks
scene.
all his blood and then leaves.
The whole movie is just awesome scene after awesome scene, actually.
And the this kind of works out for the main guy, because he comes and sees the drug dealer dead, and he's like, well, okay, I'm the drug dealer now, and takes the money he has, takes the drugs he has, and keeps selling them, and he's like, oh, cool, my family's free. And later on, they kind of encounter each other and have this really interesting connection between them. And, unfortunately, because their relationship is complicated by the fact that she is a vampire,
yeah,
and
you don't say.
Ends up
this is not a Twilight situation?
No.
Oh, bummer.
She ends up killing his father.
Oh yeah.
So no spoilers, but intense spoilers. She ends up killing his father, and after that happens,
drives a wedge between them.
Yeah, well,
a stake.
Haha.
Sorry,
yeah.
Couldn't help myself.
Not too big of one, because he kind of realizes that... Well, he realizes because he sent his father away out of his house with the cat that he has, and later on, the girl has the cat in her apartment, and he's like,
Wonder where you got that cat.
Wait a second. But they leave the city together, and they kind of end up just driving away, and you can tell that he knows, and she knows that he knows, but you're kind of left on like a kind of a question of what's gonna happen next. It just kind of ends with them looking at each other.
Mhm.
So there's definitely tension created by the fact that you don't actually know if she wants to kill him, if she's just luring him in so
Right.
that she can have a little snack. But
Yum.
but they seem to have a very real connection in the film, despite the fact that she's so dangerous. She even says in the film, "You don't know me. You don't want to be with me because I've done bad things. I'm bad." And he's like, "Well, you don't know what I've done. I've done bad things too." But no, just it's such a good movie. I watched it earlier today, actually, and just some of the moments between the two of them are just so, touching in a way that you don't really understand why you're being so touched by them, but they're just so moving.
Oh, I remember that.
You're like, oh, I'm like crying right now, and I'm not sure why. But aside from the romantic parts, it's also just a very good horror movie, and kind of
it's creepy while
it
being
is, yeah.
kind of sweet. It's still very like, what's gonna happen? I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on.
And there's a aspect of, kind of revenge fantasy because, it's a woman who's in a, you see her in
A power position.
yeah, you see her as in a supposedly vulnerable position of her walking around alone at night and being encountered by these kind of unsavory men, and she ends up, killing them.
Kind of reminds me of Teeth. We're not going to talk about
Right,
Teeth,
but yeah.
the same dynamic.
Yeah. We probably can't talk about Teeth in
Yeah.
any sort of specific way, but
We'd have to be extremely vague and weird.
if you've seen that film, you know what it's about. But just, I think that's a good, or at least enjoyable thing that sometimes happens in horror films, where you kind of see these tropes being flipped, and instead of the promiscuous female getting killed, it's the sleazy, promiscuous, kind of misogynistic men getting killed by this woman that turns on them unexpectedly.
Absolutely. Real quick, I do want to, not going to go in depth on Buffy since we're talking about horror film,
Right.
but I just want to mention that that's how the idea of Buffy the Vampire Slayer came to be.
Right.
Was that Joss Whedon was kind of talking to someone one day, and he said, there's this huge stereotype that a tiny blonde girl walks into a dark alley and she shouldn't be there because she's in danger. And he goes, I want to write a show about a tiny blonde girl who walks into an alley and chews the alley up and spits it right out.
Yes.
And that's how Buffy the Vampire Slayer
certainly
came
what
about.
happened. Yes. Lot of
I love that story.
not only Buffy, but lots of compelling female characters in that show, I would say. So, yay. Good job.
Coolio. Let's move on. Let's talk about Jennifer's Body.
Woohoo.
Megan Fox, Amanda Seyfried, all those girls.
Yep. All two of them.
All two of them. Sorry, guys. Sometimes words are hard.
True.
Yeah, so another movie that kind of flips some stereotypes. I love this movie because it in a similar way to, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Not the same tone, obviously, but that same kind of flip of expectations, because you have Megan Fox, who is this really, she's hot, she's promiscuous. She's the kind of girl that would get killed immediately in a slasher film.
Right.
But due to some creepy satanic band members, she gets turned into a demon.
Okay.
Which is definitely scary, but kind of awesome, because then she just starts eating men. She lures them in with her sexuality and then just eats them. And it's amazing.
Rad.
And then Amanda Seyfried, who is her best friend, who is like, the nerdy one, who you think is going to be, I guess, kind of the final girl
Yeah.
type thing, because she's nerdy and she's blonde. And she's not necessarily a virgin. I think she has sex in the movie, but
she has that kind of aura.
Yeah, she's the moral one, you know, the soft-spoken savior type.
Yeah.
And you know, it's kind of awesome because she ends up killing oh gosh, sorry, it's been a hot second since I saw Jennifer's Body. She tries to kill Megan Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she does kill Megan Fox. She ends up in prison. But then I think she's possessed by something because she's floating in prison. She's floating like 2 feet off the ground. And then she goes and... Yeah, that's it. Okay, she kills... Sorry, guys. Like I said, it's been a minute. But she goes and kills Megan Fox because she's a demon. And then she gets sent to prison from, you know, murdering someone who they don't realize she's a demon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she goes to prison, but then she somehow gained the powers of this demon, right?
Mm-hmm.
When she murdered Megan Fox, because she's like levitating in the prison cell. And then she breaks out of prison and hunts down the band members who got Megan Fox possessed in the first place and ruined her best friend's life.
Right.
And slaughter them
Mm-hmm.
as a revenge right at the last minute. It's a very good ending.
Yes.
But it's just kind of funny because, you know, we get this Megan Fox character who you think, oh, that's the kind of girl who would die immediately, and she becomes this demon.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the kind of final girl, virginal savior, blah, blah, blah. And then she also gets some powers.
Yes.
And goes and murders some people. But in a heroic way.
Yes. In a cool way.
Yeah. Anyway, so I love that whole movie.
Yeah, in horror movies, when you're a viewer, you don't really have to necessarily hold on to all your regular morals. You can kind of let go of some of them to enjoy what's going on and to identify with either the killer or the victims.
A lot of people have said that's why they love horror films.
Yeah.
Which creeps me out on one hand.
Yeah.
But
it can
when
be
I
good or bad,
watch
depending.
movies like Jennifer's Body, I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's a difference between somebody wanting to be Michael Myers and that. Because if somebody's like, man, yeah, I love Michael Myers, I really identify with him, I'd be like, cool, I have to run in the other direction now.
Right. Okay, I identify with Jamie Lee Curtis, so I'm going to go.
Bye! I'm a run.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Another film that's I feel like is very related to Jennifer's Body is called Under the Skin.
All right.
2013.
I've not actually heard of this.
ScarJo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Lover. This is kind of like Alien. It's a science fiction horror.
Mm-hmm.
Based on a novel. Well, sort of. But basically, ScarJo plays this kind of otherworldly entity.
All right.
Who descends down into Scotland. And...
Okay.
It's, again, like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night and like Jennifer's Body, where, you know, this really hot female figure is there, and she uses that to lure men in, and then she preys on them.
Yeah.
I think maybe she steals ScarJo's figure from, like, the first person.
Right.
That she eats.
Yeah.
But then she uses that body
to
lure in men.
Them,
yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was pretty related. Just another, you know, woman who uses her sexuality to be the predator instead of the preyed upon, which is a nice little flip.
Yeah. Hey, one more like that I just remembered. Is The Witch.
You mean the Vavitch?
The Vavitch from 2015, which is actually a period supernatural horror, so it's kind of a historical. Takes place with like these I colonists, I guess you'd say, to
I wouldn't
America.
say that it has that same type, though.
Well, it has a subversion of the final girl trope, not in the sense that she's
Yeah,
that she
I
uses her
guess.
sexuality.
Right, okay.
It was in the
okay.
Wikipedia article for Final Girl.
Sure.
She
Then she joins a colony of witches, so she's not really the final girl
no.
at all.
She is the final girl from her family, and basically a witch torments their family because they're kind of alone out in the
Well, it's not actually
wilderness.
a witch, is it? Later there's witches, but I think it's Satan who is presented as a goat who's tormenting their family.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, kind of both.
Yeah, okay, you're right. I guess the witch does
there is
like
a
show
witch
up.
because the witch takes the baby.
Yeah,
and
she
kills the
does.
baby and
She
uses
does.
it to be like young.
Philip, I think.
Yeah. Well, the goat's Philip.
Oh yeah.
The goat is King Philip. There's a goat. The goat is Satan.
Yes.
But it's just tormenting their family, and the girl is like really scared, but like,
And her father calls her the
her
the
family
witch.
starts to turn on her just out of fear because they think it's her.
Yeah,
they think
very
she's
Salem-y.
the witch. So basically, her whole family ends up getting killed, and she's like, "Well, I am the witch now." And she goes off into the woods and becomes a witch.
They present her so often
Yeah.
to her own self
Yeah.
as being the demonic force
Yeah,
that
it's
in
like
the
a-
end, when they're all dead due to
She's
other
like-
circumstances,
Yeah.
this witch I guess Satan approaches her
Yeah.
and says, I know you weren't the witch before, but want to be the witch now?
Yeah.
And she's like, I got nothing to lose.
Yep. It's kind of like
Woo.
a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, absolutely.
That
That's
they're
exactly
like-
what that is.
We're gonna treat you as evil, so she's like, well, I'm gonna become evil then.
Might as well.
Might as well. Which I think there's things to say about that, but not necessarily time in which to say them, so.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, what was I feel like we had one more that we wanted to talk about.
Did we?
Maybe not.
I feel like I covered everything that I had thought about the final girl.
Oh boy, y'all. Alright, well then we will come back with our final thoughts on women in horror, some conclusions for you.
Yep.
In just a moment. Right now, enjoy some Florence and the Machine with Breaking Down. Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back to the final segment of our show today. Thank you for tuning in to Studio U, Voice of OU.
Yes.
This is Pop Culture Feminists. And if you are just tuning in, you're catching the end of our show. However, you can catch the show after us, Lost Forgotten Oklahoma, and she is going to have a super special guest, a paranormal expert who's going to tell you all about the ghosts on campus. So please stay tuned for that. Yeah. We have also been doing a Halloween episode, but of course we've been talking about some spooky films.
Yes.
Which?
Spooky films.
Security in this office park is a joke. Last year I came to work with my spud gun in a duffel bag.
Maybe.
I sat at my desk all
find
day
out
Do you
later.
hear
with
some
a rifle
deranged
that shoots
laughter?
potatoes
You
at 60
should.
pounds
You
per
should.
square inch.
All right. Well, that was that.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
If it wasn't, I'll just do a scary laugh real quick. Nah.
That was beautiful, Lily. Thank you.
I couldn't do much. My throat hurts.
I know it.
I did my best.
Alrighty. Well, we promised you our final thoughts on Halloween and women in spooky films.
We
and
love all of them.
Yeah.
Love Halloween. Love women. The end. Bye.
That's pretty much it. Obviously, horror has been a mixed bag for female characters and
A worm? Yeah.
female directors and everything
Yep.
like that. But we're getting there. We're finding some progressiveness, thank goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest thing I learned in my horror movie class is that horror movies very much reflect like the social issues of the time
Oh,
that they're coming
absolutely.
out. So I think, but especially as we get into the last 5 or 10 years and going forward, we're going to be seeing a lot of hopefully female driven horror that kind of plays with misogynistic tropes in horror. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more role reversal, a lot more female-led, which I think we already have with things like Hereditary and A Quiet Place. Both have female main characters, I believe. So, or at least prominent female characters.
Yes, absolutely.
And, you've been seeing a lot.
Oh, gosh, in A Quiet Place, she has to give birth to a baby.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Silently.
A lot of themes of, like, motherhood coming up. So, I think we're definitely on a trend where that's going to be something we see. And maybe even also a commentary on race that we saw started in Get Out.
Yeah.
So I figure we're probably going to see more things like that. Not exactly like that, but that deal with the same sort of ideas. Or at least I hope we do.
Oh, I hope so too. Alrighty, guys. Thank you for joining us. We're going to play you out with some Florence and the Machine and some Beyonce.
Woohoo.
And make sure to stay tuned for Lost Forgotten Oklahoma. It's a show you do not want to miss. I'm going to know where all the ghosts are on campus. But
so you can avoid them.
Catch us next week. We're going to have some local female musicians in here. We're going to be playing some of their music, chatting with them about what it's like being a female musician, particularly in the Oklahoma scene.
Yep.
So thank y'all, and good night.